Hello.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
I can. How you doing?
I am good. There we go. So I did ask how you're weathering the weather storm that's happening in
Ah,
Hong Kong right now.
yeah. So, for everyone listening that isn't in Hong Kong, we have a pretty big typhoon. It's currently fairly wet.
Hmm.
How are things over where you are?
It's it was windier than what I thought it was actually, because it's, we get Typhoon 8 and it's like, oh, maybe it's not actually that much of a big deal as it can sometimes happen, but this one seemed pretty blowy actually. So I guess it's worth the lockdown, I suppose. Whatever we got to put up
Yeah,
with for now, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm out in Tung Chung, which is near the airport, out in the middle of nowhere in a village house. So we're
Hmm.
quite open to the environment. So, yeah, it's been
Ah.
very windy and rainy. But anyway, we're all here
Hmm.
now. We're all in the metaverse. So let's get on with some of these questions, shall we?
Hmm. Let's go for it.
So, this one being quite heavily MotoGP focused, the
Hmm.
first question is on the kind of development side. So,
Mhm.
um, apparently earlier we said that we'd faced some problems with the Flow blockchain. Can you kind of explain some of those issues and what are kind of the solutions that we're working towards?
For sure, for sure. So, I mean, like one of the big things with working on Flow. So we really do like Flow. That is the reason why we're deciding to build Formula E on it, and it won't be the last thing we build on it. But it is very much kind of a in development deployment of a blockchain, right? So to get into like some of the actual real bones of what this is problem wise. So obviously for us, it's kind of we'd been building on Ethereum for quite a while, so we're very, very familiar with what that is. But when it comes to Flow, there are some things that you can't do that basically became kind of like a very natural kind of consideration when we design stuff, right? So, for example, and it's only really become kind of more of a legitimate consideration right now, but for like you couldn't do essentially before a transaction gets pushed, you can basically get a gas estimate, transaction estimate, which is in theory not supposed to be a problem on Flow, considering the transaction cost is much, much lower. But of course, when volume increases, transaction volume increases, that sort of stuff's going to become more and more important. There's also been an instance where kind of sporks happen as it gets deployed and updated and stuff. And basically, what that can sometimes mean is certain block data is not, or at least kind of transaction data is available, but not necessarily block data or the blocks themselves. And the ways that we get that stuff is very different too. Um, there is also kind of like anybody who participated in the MotoGP sale, they probably kind of saw that they were requested to essentially, you know, let's call it kind of create an allocation or kind of a provisioning of their wallet, which means that you need to actually provide or have an amount of flow to be able to receive NFTs on Flow or any assets on Flow. There needs to be kind of pay for storage essentially. Um, and the thing is that that's not kind of a one-time deal. It's like the more assets that you want to store in your wallet, the more flow that you need to have to increase your storage space. And like if you think about, I mean, if we look at the stuff that we've built previously with F1 and Rev Racing and stuff like that, is that we have players with like thousands, like let's say like it's not like unknown for a guy to have like 100 NFTs for one of the games. Doing that on Flow requires kind of more than a single like base kind of allocation of storage with their wallet, right? And that needs to go up. And then one of the things that isn't readily kind of developed and available is a relinquishing of that storage. So essentially, you're allocating an amount of flow permanently, which maybe you don't actually want to do, especially if you're allocating it out of your own pocket, right? So ways to manage that stuff as well. So there's kind of a considerable amount of changes, and just down to like how kind of contract deployment works, right? So very different to kind of the EVM networks we've worked with before, we cannot deploy contracts ourselves. So yes, we can deploy them in test environments, but we can't deploy them in production environments. And that obviously kind of gives us some restrictions of how kind of iterative and experimental we can kind of be as well, because we can't just kind of push stuff out there and see how it goes. But then there's the whole kind of infrastructure around Flow too, where there are things that just do not exist. So there isn't, as of right now, kind of a robust DeFi platform that's there, which means, okay, what certain things do we have to understand when we're deploying stuff for MotoGP that we cannot leverage like we were able to leverage previously with F1, and that sort of thing. And it's kind of, Rev being put on Flow is also something we had to kind of work around and can kind of make considerations for until it is going to be there, like, pretty soon. So there's a lot there that is very, very different. And how metadata is structured and all the rest of it, stuff like that is also very different too. But yeah, it's a completely different environment, and not only is the blockchain new, but the Cadence language is also kind of developed from scratch, and any language itself can be prone to bugs. So not only is it a case of this new blockchain technology, but also this new smart contract language as well. But I think, like, bottom line for us is, like, what we've experienced over, let's say, the last 12 months or so working on Flow is that we really like it. It's super, super interesting. It's doing some really cool stuff. But yeah, it's definitely like, there are teething problems, right? That's kind of always going to be the case whenever anything's new.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think you touched on a lot of things there that I quite frankly don't even know, didn't know existed. So I think, yeah, that's definitely a lot of great information there for a lot of the people listening. So looking at the utility side of of the recent Hotshot sale, how will they be used in the MotoGP Ignition universe, let's say?
So off the bat, they will have, for the, essentially, I mean, we're calling it card champions right now. It's very, very much subject to change. Let's kind of see how we end up going with it. But they have the same kind of utility as the other cards that we've sold. It's just that there's the variable to the fact that they are video cards and the metadata is different. And that offers both kind of advantages or potentially disadvantages depending on how you play it, to people playing that card. So, for example, the way that the Hotshots work is that they are taken from any season, any race during the season. Every single race will have a set of Hotshots. And basically what that means is that, and the way the videos are, is that they always have, or it's very often that they have more than one driver, more than one rider that's in the video, right? So when that's the case, basically, if you're playing a pair or trying to match a pair of cards to actually participate in Card Champions, you would have a hotshot that can actually be played theoretically in two different teams. So it's a much more flexible card than maybe the team card or the rider card or the bike card, because they need to have a very specific match. But you can have a hotshot that could have 3 riders in it, or 4 riders in it, or 2 riders, but they can be from completely different teams, which means it can be utilized in a far more flexible manner. It's just that there is then an offset or balance to that, which basically means that the overall earnings for it could be lower. But that's kind of how it's up. So you have more flexibility, but kind of a lower return potentially from playing it.
Okay, cool. I think you've mentioned, or you at least touched upon a few of the key features there of what the cards will be used for. So the next question is very much along similar lines, and I know I would like to know how this works as well. The question is, hi there. Bought both Ignition Series packs and hodled them ever since. So how do I actually put them to use?
So you will be able to essentially play them in Card Champion. So if you open them and you have the cards at least. So again, just to kind of give a very high level of what Card Champions is, it's essentially a faux fantasy sport. So we don't do it to run directly in parallel with the season. We want it to have a bit more flexibility than that and allow people to do shorter events and participate with convenience. But the premise is quite similar, where let's say you are able to play the cards that you have, and they are going to participate for you in a season. And the season itself is somewhat simulated, but it references actual kind of race data and performances. So at least you're going to get an idea of the potential value of a certain type of card. So let's say if you have a Marc Marquez, you're probably thinking, okay, great, this guy's going to be pretty good every race, regardless of weather and kind of, the variables there. But then also it's kind of like you've got to have both the bike and the rider of Marc Marquez. And then even so, it doesn't necessarily mean just because Marc Marquez came first a bunch of times in a row, it doesn't mean he's always going to come first, because there's also a dice roll variable that's going to be in play. Because it's kind of, we want to make sure that people have, or at least like not everybody has to go for the same set, right? And essentially they're allowed to play and able to play and win rewards with the cards that they may already have on hand. But not only that, it's like we're also going to have kind of less competitive experiences as well, where people can just simply kind of earn assets, whether they be Rev or other types of assets, from just basically collecting the cards as well. So like if you do have, a collection of all of the Ducatis, then that is an earn that you can kind of claim for and stuff like that too. But yeah, it's kind of in the pipeline right now. We have kind of, obviously the 2021 season worth of Hotshots that we're lining up. But then we also have other, not necessarily Hotshots, but other card types. So obviously we've got the 2020 cards, we've got 2021 cards coming through, and we also have like a super cool collection of legends, right? Which is basically all the guys who have been riding in MotoGP for the last, however many years back you want to count, like the last kind of 40, 50 years or so, or at least kind of competing in the top tier. And they're a collectible set of cards as well. And they're ones that we'll probably start looking to release more kind of a next year thing. But yeah, like all of these cards, they can be played in these ways. They can be used as collectibles and redeemed for collection rewards. And then also they tie into the manager game as well, in how they kind of, like I think I mentioned a couple of times, where essentially they can act as certain types of buffs or advantages through kind of the ownership of the cards. But then like what becomes very exciting for us, and this is kind of a more abstract thing, but it'll become kind of a little, we'll be able to do some very cool things with when Formula E starts to kind of grow a little bit more, is the idea of the interoperability of this stuff. Because the reason why we make Rev Motorsport and we say this is a Rev Motorsport title is because it's recognized by everything else that's part of Rev Motorsport. So like similar to like a very simple example that we did is that you bought a pack and now you've got a Rev Racing car. But there will be more iterations on that, ones that actually leverage the assets that someone owns in a much more kind of real way. So, you could be basically trading a card for a different type of asset in a different Rev Racing game. Or if you have X amount of cards and you're playing Rev Racing or Formula E, that collection is abstracted in another way for the performance in that game or that other experience that we'll have.
Yeah, very cool. I think that's a interesting way of kind of tying things all together. And yeah, there you go. For for all you listening who may or may not know what's coming, I think Sean has just shared a lot of alpha there. So that's very exciting. Um, so with that, and with people that are holding team cards and rider cards and stuff, there are a lot of teams who have changed mid-season this year. For example, with Maverick Vinales going over to Aprilia, with all the issues he had over at Yamaha.
Mm.
Um, so will the 2021 Vinales be a monster Yamaha, or will it be an Aprilia to reflect his new team, or how will this kind of how are we going to be handling these sort of changes mid-season?
Mm. So, I mean, ultimately, like what we do issue is kind of like what we end up kind of, with our IP partner, right? What they want to have being represented essentially. But, there will be cases where kind of when we're in kind of a more mature state and our cadence is kind of on the nose, where essentially 2020 season comes out and boom, all the cards are available day one of the season, right? That's something that can happen. And then, oh, there's a change that happens mid-season. What we'd look to do then is actually issue a limited run of new cards with the new kind of team or rider setups that happen, and then those older cards just become collectibles like everything else. So there are a few ways we approach it. Some of them obviously is kind of working with the MotoGP kind of team themselves and how they want to have their license interpreted, and what they're comfortable with and how they think it should be presented. But also ways where the fact is that if they're issued at a date and they exist, then they exist. And then what we want to do is that if there's any kind of moment, like for example Valentino Rossi retired, right, and there's something that we really want to do around that, because we want to make a moment, a collection around the fact that he's retired. And that won't be the only thing we would do. So if there are kind of momentous things that happen, or even kind of minor things, as in some cases maybe a team change could be, let's say, minor, as when kind of looked in respect to kind of the retirement of Rossi, we would want to kind of have a way to capture that, and the cards are a great way to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's cool. I think for everyone, who wants to kind of see that change reflected, I think there's, we're obviously, doing things in the background to kind of ensure that all parties are happy, right? So no, that's good. So with regards to buying these packs and buying the cards, I think it's no secret that traditional payment methods aren't always the most kind of most friendly method, and a lot of people in this space are in here because of the the obviously the decentralization of the financial system, and crypto being kind of a great way to interact between buyer and seller. So the question
Mm.
is, are we planning to use crypto to sell the packs, whether it's Flow or Rev or FUSD or something along those lines? Um, because using credit card is not available sometime, is the
Mm.
comment there.
So right now, we are building a sales contract to allow for sales in both Flow and Rev. If Rev is yet to exist, but like I said, it's going to be there as soon as we get the audit wrapped up. Then we're ready to go live with Flow. So our intent is to move to crypto-based sales, but credit card is very important for continued growth, and we're looking in other ways to support credit card, not only for direct sales, but also later for marketplace. But knowing that we do definitely want to avoid like, long drawn out kind of times that it could take to kind of exit and take your funds out, right? So that's something we're definitely going to avoid when it does come to implementing credit card for marketplaces.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think those are good points there. So gameplay. There's a question about
Mm.
gameplay. So with the MotoGP season over after, after 3 more races, or in 3 races time, the MotoGP season will be over, and the Card Champions game being based on real life events. How is the game going to? Oh, I think we've kind of touched on
Yeah,
some of those already. We going to be running
yeah,
simulations, or wait for the 2022 season to start? I think you've kind of touched on that a little bit.
yeah, yeah. It's all historic stuff. Like I say, it's a faux season, so we don't need to run 1-to-1. We want it to be playable all year round.
Yeah, cool. All right, so I'll skip over the next question as well because it's
Mm.
kind of on similar lines. But marketplace, you kind of mentioned the marketplace there. Will there be kind of a make an offer option in the marketplace itself?
Not for the first iteration. The first one will be basically list for a set price and then buy for that set price. But then obviously later we will add lists for any assets that exist, because that would need kind of better filtering and search options. So filter and search will be quite limited with the first rollout. But then obviously on top of that, we build bundling of assets, being able to sell your own kind of collections if you want to do so, and then like more advanced things such as auctions and stuff.
Okay, yeah, cool. No, I think that's we're all looking forward to that feature for sure.
Mm.
So I guess that kind of wraps up some of the initial questions on MotoGP. Looking at Rev Racing now. So looking at the Rev Aspire car, the one that we,
Mm,
the second car that we released.
yes.
The question is, well, I was driving the Rev Cup Pro car and it flipped over going around a curve. It didn't seem right. And one time
Mhm,
with the Sprint 7 or maybe the Sprint 5, the same thing happened on the same curve.
mm.
Now,
So the Aspire, we have a version in test at the moment which has fixed what was essentially a setting where the center of gravity and basically the weight of the car was. That's what was throwing it off. So that stuff has kind of been fixed in the current build we're playing with. But what it was essentially, the center of gravity was off. So obviously, any minor bump would set the car off in a way that it's not supposed to because it's kind of interpreting the gravity much higher than what it's supposed to be. So it was kind of an adjustment within the physics engine as opposed to anything else. Because even though there were certain adjustments that were made to the circuit itself, the ambition was driving like with some differences, of course, because the circuit had some kind of material changes, but ultimately, yeah, the physics essentially were kind of needed some work on the Aspire. So we have that fix. We're testing that fix, and then there's a couple of other fixes we're testing, like the granular throttle and stuff like that, making sure that ideally that becomes a configurable option for those guys playing on keyboard. But yeah, we that issue should be addressed as soon as we can kind of wrap up the tests we need and push it out that new build.
cool. Sounds good. So another question with Rev
Mm,
Racing, looking at rental system. Can
mm,
we one day have a car rental system, so before purchasing a vehicle, possibly being able to rent it and try it out?
mm,
Um, I guess that, we have something that is, well, not that not that exactly, but something kind of
mm.
along similar lines. But is that something that we're looking to kind of build out, like a test, like a car kind of test drive sort of system?
So there's a couple of things that. So yes, there's obviously hiring a driver, so that's one way. We will have, and we have a contract that is fairly kind of decently developed at this point that is allows for rental of NFTs, like true rental, where as a NFT owner, I can say someone can rent this, they need to just pay me, let's say 50 rev, and they can rent it for 5 days, right? And it's a fairly kind of rigid system in regards to like how the payout and return ends up working, but it's a true rental system as well. Um, that's something that is there, but I mean, again, it's not finished, and these kind of contracts they need auditing and stuff. But these are features that we're definitely working on, and are kind of super important to give flexibility. And stuff like rental is another aspect of ownership as well. So yes, you can own it, keep it, use it as much as you like, but also having the option to rent it is all part of the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, no, cool. I think that's answers that question pretty well.
Mm,
Ooh, here's a good one. Kind of a don't know how kind of deep you can go into this question, but
mm.
will we be able to drive our cars in the sandbox one day?
So we there Rev Racing cars, if and when they appear in the sandbox, they will be voxely sandbox versions, right? But yeah, I mean, like ultimately, again, it's like within Rev Motorsport, we want interoperability. We also want the same in the sandbox. What that experience will be based on what the sandbox experience makes sense to be, right? And it has a very different physics engine and a very different kind of engine, even though completely different to what we have with Rev Racing. So it's that never ever going to be like a one-to-one thing. But yeah, I mean, like we want our assets, any assets that we build, to be part of the sandbox, because the sandbox is very, very cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think be cool to see some kind of, Mario Kart-esque sort
Mm,
of feature with the Rev Racing cars inside a sandbox, but that's just me.
mm, mm,
Um, so looking to the future of Rev as a platform, as a motorsport ecosystem. Um, will the future Okay, hang on. Let me decipher this question. Um, all right, so will we have will we have motorsports such as motocross and NASCAR and stuff like that? And is there
Mm.
anything that you can kind of shed light on that may or may not be coming?
There's nothing I can shed light on.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a case of pointing at us being Animoca brands and taking that very literally. IP although Rev Racing is an original title, IP is incredibly important to Rev Racing. And we are always talking to as many people as we can about interesting things. And the NFT space has become far more kind of enticing for a lot of obvious reasons to a lot of different brands right now. So we're part of those conversations that happen. We want to grow our ecosystem and our metaverse as much as we can. And yeah, like we've only really just kicked things off, right? So we're super
Yeah.
early. So, but yeah, the idea is that we want to be able to work with as many people as we can.
No, definitely. I think that's very well put. I think
Mm,
speaking on the brand side as well, we're very busy with speaking to a number of different parties on trying to do something interesting for the Rev Motorsport ecosystem, and whether that's drivers, teams, series, tracks,
mm,
manufacturers, always looking for fun and interesting ways to expand the ecosystem.
mm,
And I think we, eagle-eyed super fans, let's say, of MotoGP may have noticed um, something fairly small, but significant still, on one of the riders' helmets. But we've actually just finalized everything, and the press release should be coming out in the next couple days. But yeah, very exciting to have a MotoGP rider now in our stables, who
mm,
will be very similar to what kind of Joey Logano and Juan Pablo Montoya, the interaction that we've had with them has been fantastic, obviously. And so now, we've got someone on two wheels joining the ecosystem, so very exciting. You guys will hear all about it very soon. But yeah, I mean, if any of you guys are super fans of MotoGP, you may or may not have spotted already. So yeah, so keep your eyes and ears peeled.
mm. Super cool. Super cool.
Awesome. So I think that wraps up most of the questions I've got in front of me. But if anyone's got any questions, now is the time to raise your hand and I'll pull you up onto the stage. Fairly, fairly quiet there in the audience. Oh, we've got one. All right. Let me see if I can. You go, Bhavna. All right. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Uh,
Hmm.
my question is about the reward system. Can we
Hmm.
improve the reward system in the Rev Racing?
Of course. So basically, a few hours ago, we finished
Mm,
discussing with the team that we're working with to help build out the reward system. Um, so it's something that we've gone back and forward on, and like we've always said, our intention is to make all the rewards claimable. It's just doing it at scale because, like right now, let's say that um, if we have 3 events per day, the
mm,
ideal scenario is that we would then push to be claimable like 24 hours worth of rewards, right? And then people can come and freely claim it. But then we also need to be able to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a corner with the system we're building, because essentially, like 3 events in a single day is kind of still very few events, right? So what we're gonna have, and this isn't too far away at all, so that's why we need to plan for it now, is scenarios where we have a big event running every 3 days, maybe 3 concurrent events running every day, maybe free sessions which will become rewarded. So there's something being earned there as well, people playing free sessions as much as they like. And then even though it's not around the corner, but we have the multiplayer system, right? And then when people can play those events themselves as freely as they like. So, there can be scenarios where essentially in a single day, there are several hundred events that are going to be rewarded in some manner, which means that there are, at that point, probably well in the thousands, tens of thousands of people that we need to kind of line up rewards for. So then we would kind of take all of those events, put them kind of take the equivalent of, let's lack of a better term, a snapshot of all those placements, addresses, rewards earned, audit them as quickly as we can. So I mean, like, at least do an internal check and then a finance validation of that, and then we push those on chain, and then they become claimable the next day. So it's every 24 hours we push a new set of rewards that become claimable. But due to kind of the way that we're scaling up how the event system works, we just need to make sure that we don't kind of come to a point where it's like, okay, we built this, it works right now, but now we've got to rebuild it all again, and basically have a scenario where a more flexible claim system doesn't come out for months and months and months. But yeah, we definitely don't want to be like having people needing to wait like they wait right now. And we work super hard, although the delays are there, people work super hard to try and put together the rewards as quickly as possible. And it's not only the rev stuff, it's also kind of making sure that we follow up with our KYC provider to make sure all of that stuff's been checked off. And it's a lot of cars that we need to prepare metadata for, ensure that all the addresses are valid, that we send them to the right people. So there's a lot of stuff that we do to make sure we don't make a mistake, right? And we will make mistakes even in these cases, but it's a lot of addresses, a lot of content, a lot of value in regards to like dollar value, and then a lot of NFTs as well. So we just need to be okay, because this is blockchain. It's not as though we can take anything back if we send it to the wrong person. So we need to be doubly sure that before we do any push in the manual manner that we're handling rewards right now, we just need to be sure that everything is okay and checked with as much sanity as possible. But yeah, ultimately in the future, we want to switch to a complete claim system, but it just needs to be able to claim kind of multiple tokens and manage a far more higher volume of events that happen concurrently and kind of, individually as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bhavna, and thank you, Sean. All right, we've got another question from Aonda03. Aonda. Hello.
You're muted.
Maybe he's not speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Yeah. So my question is that can we have a mobile version of Rev Racing where we can generate the links for our drivers through the mobile?
Good suggestion. We can definitely look at doing that. I think the only thing is that at least right now we only support MetaMask, so it'll probably be only accessible through MetaMask's mobile browser in the short term, until we kind of integrate Wallet Connect. That's a bit more flexible. But yeah, for sure, that's a good idea. We can have a look at doing that.
Yeah, that will be easy for non-gamers. They go to office and everywhere, so they can't open their laptops or their computers everywhere. So they can easily do it through. They can generate links and send to the drivers. That will be so easy.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. Yeah.
That's just my idea. So I want to share. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks for the suggestion. All right. Are there any more questions from the floor? Pretty quiet day today. Maybe everyone's stuck indoors with this typhoon.
It's that Wednesday blues. That's what it is.
It's where it is. Yeah.
Yeah. That's everyone suffers from Wednesday blues.
No, not really.
Well, if obviously if questions come, the text and chat is all there, so you can always throw them in there. But
Yeah.
otherwise, I will say thank you very much, Matt. And always good. and glad to know that you're all typhoon safe.
Yeah, likewise.
But yeah, I guess we're good for Wednesday. And
Sounds good. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, pleasure as always. And I'm sure everyone here, as well as myself included, have learned a lot from your wise words.
thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks,
Until next
everyone.
time. Bye bye.